And so how much startup capital was required?
Literally pounds. The first 3 years was mistakes galore.
We did everything. So we unloaded the containers. We used to have a phone by the container that if someone called the customer service, one of us would hop off the container, answer the call,
Okay.
solve the query, and then jump back in.
Big moment, the first sale. Tell me about that. Look at the smiles already on your faces. Look how happy it still hits you.
But it's making those things right that make a massive difference. And I think a lot of companies disregard that. And one thing that we use is we are essentially champagne taste for beer money. So
I like that.
people that want
I'm stealing that.
I think COVID was an incredibly tough time. Our sales literally doubled.
Sounds awful.
It sounds really tough. I don't know.
Vanity was never that important to us, and having a flashy car or having designer clothes wasn't anything we cared about.
What is it that's driving you forwards now?
The aim of being the largest furniture company in the world.
Welcome to the Ground Floor Podcast. Our guests today are the founders of Furniturebox, an online furniture retailer that's been featured in the Sunday Times 100. It's been listed as the fastest growing online business in the Southwest, and whose founders have also been listed on the iconic Forbes 30 Under 30. So it's a really exciting conversation today. Please welcome our guests, Monty, George, and Dan Beckles. How you guys doing?
Very good, Ollie. Yeah, not too bad.
Yeah, thank you very much for that introduction. But yeah, no, we're doing very well. Thank you for having us on.
Good. No, thank you for coming down. So obviously, for anyone who's not familiar with the podcast or familiar with the business, just take a couple minutes, summarize what Furniturebox is, how it started, and we'll go from there.
Sure. So in a nutshell, Furniturebox is an e-commerce furniture company delivering goods across the UK, Germany, and the US. Next day delivery, great quality furniture with a great team atmosphere back in the offices.
But just to add a little bit on to that, we sell on lots of different channels. So we have our website, which is our main platform, but then also we sell through the likes of Amazon, Wayfair, Robert Dias, B&Q, and the range. So it's always been a strategy that we've had, and it's really fueled our growth over the last few years.
And
Amazing. Dan
and I started the business straight after school. We were great friends all throughout school, played football together. And Dan was going to go to university, and I said, "Do you want to come and run a furniture company with me?" And he was mad enough to say yes.
Wow.
And 7 years later.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's going all right.
It's going all right.
To say.
There's a risk that
right.
paid off.
Yeah.
Right.
So, okay, let's take it right back to the beginning. Furniture. Why?
So if we're going right back to the beginning, then we've got to go right back to selling bread at my local village store. So I was actually 7 when I started selling bread. So I used to bake the bread in the morning. I'd drop it into the local village store before I went to school, and then I would come back each day and collect whatever I'd sold. It was on a sale or return basis, and then that really sparked an interest in selling. And ever since then, from the age of 7, I sold everything from honey to beeswax candles to pest control items to Poundland items. And then when I was 17, having tried all manner of different things, I was looking for a product that it was quite hard to enter a market. So I thought about lots of different things, and I wanted a product as well that had a lot of scope and I could really see myself being passionate about. And furniture instantly jumped out. It's heavy and bulky, and it has a lot of barriers to entry in the sense that you can't just do it from your living room like
Sure.
lots of other people were. And then I said to, as I said earlier, I said to Dan, because I know Dan was really, really keen on business. Do you want to do this with me? I see a massive opportunity. I've got some containers coming in. We're leaving school. Just give it a shot. So
Yeah, and I think the exciting thing with furniture is it's so expansive. So it's not just a single product. So for example, with dirt bikes, you might have a few different types, but
Sure.
with furniture, you've got a whole host of categories. And also it's quite a fun thing to be in because you can design the product right from scratch and get samples delivered into you and then sell it. And so it's a really exciting industry to be in. And as Monty said, I think the barriers are quite high to enter because it costs a lot. It's typically quite big and bulky as well. So not only the import cost, but the export cost. So I think for us, it was a real market we thought we could make a dent in and do really well in.
Yeah, for sure. And so taking it to the beginning in terms of getting started, everyone, I think the first question they'll have is, okay, so money, how did you get the startup capital? What was that spent on?
So I was always taught when I was younger to be incredibly frugal and save. So ever since I was young, I'd always been saving. I never spent on anything. My parents always said, you can't buy something new, go on eBay, go and find it for a better price. So that was always drilled into me. So from initially when I started selling bread, I did it just from a few pounds, and then through savings from grandparents giving £50 at Christmas, and money as well that I'd made through bread, I started buying things from Poundland. So I used to pass it every day going to school, and I knew how to buy on eBay, and I thought about, actually, should I start trying to sell something? And because Poundland was buying product, end of line product, at the time, there was a lot of good deals because they had to sell everything for £1, but the actual value of those products was normally far, far greater.
And for anyone listening at home, just quickly, what's an end of line product?
So an end of line product is a product that is being sold potentially by another business when they go bust. So they're picking up these bargains for probably 20p to the pound, and then Poundland was selling them obviously for £1. But the normal retail value of these products might have been about £15. So an example would be a sushi making kit.
Yeah.
And I was buying them from Poundland and selling them for £10 on eBay.
That sounds like the early days of Amazon FBA, to be honest with you, doesn't it?
Yeah.
I think the value of money has always been something that we've held very closely. So we have completely bootstrapped the whole business up until the point where we got to today. And part of that as well, as Monty said, growing up, money was incredibly important. He was very frugal, with money growing up. And it was similar to me, where my parents at the age of 15 told me that they weren't giving me any more money for anything, and I had to go and get a job. So very early on, even before that, we realised the value of money and how important it was, and to spend it wisely. And that sort of prompted everything going forward in terms of what we do, who we are, and where we spend our money, because we had to make profit in order to go to that next level. And so we've always been incredibly frugal.
And so how much startup capital was required right at the beginning?
Literally pounds.
Okay.
So yeah, really, really nothing. In terms of Furniturebox though, all of the money that I'd accumulated through trading from an early age was then invested into Furniturebox, into buying stock. So we had age on our side, so the accumulating effect of starting so young and not having any outgoings as well, when it's compounding in terms of investing in stock, reselling it, was fairly large. So I didn't have any overheads to begin with. So I was fortunate to be able to then invest that money into Furniturebox. And it's something that we've always wanted to maintain in terms of not taking outside investment, because we find that when it's your own money, you really know how to look after it, where to spend it. You understand where the profit is coming from in the business, and where you might be also leaking and you're less careless. That's always been our philosophy.
I think the only overheads you really have when you're that age is sort of McDonald's and beer.
True. Yeah, very good point. So for the first piece of furniture you get at the beginning, are you white labeling it? Are you sending it off to be designed and getting it built and designed yourself? Like, because I think, again, all of this is about drilling in just how did it happen? So you think, okay, we're going to do furniture. Where do you even go to get furniture? How does that come about?
So it was all online. So reading forums, looking at sites like e-commerce sites, so that will take you to all parts of the world. You can read about different manufacturers. So we use sites initially. So we'd go on sites like Alibaba, but there are a few more to find these suppliers. Looking back, it's not the way that I perhaps would have done it if I knew everything I knew now. But especially when you're just finding out and you're just trying to look for different opportunities in the market, online.
If I could pull at that thread, how would you do it now? That part of the process.
So if I knew what I knew now, and I knew 100% that I wanted to go into furniture, I would go out to a exhibition. I would go and go to the exhibition, meet the people, see what you're buying, because the first 3 years was mistakes galore. So we would have not made those mistakes. Had we known.
I think it's quite difficult though, because it all depends on how much capital you have available, and going out to an exhibition might cost you thousands of pounds, and there's no guarantee that you're going to get a return from that. And so it's similar to the concept of us selling on our channels, where it's a very easy access to go on somewhere like Alibaba, where you have pre-existing suppliers that you can choose. You don't necessarily need to go out. You could still get a sample over, and the cost is minimal to you. But as Monty said, if we could go back now and we had the capital available, definitely going out to an exhibition, seeing the product there and then, and then being able to take it from there.
Yeah, I can imagine, especially with furniture, those are quite expensive mistakes to make right at the start.
Yeah, we made some big ones. Yeah, we made some really, really big ones. So yeah, with regards to packaging, just getting the packaging wrong. We didn't know anything about packaging. We obviously we were sending products out, and we used to get loads of damages. And we've now, well, we knew that we were getting damages because we were talking to the customers. We were seeing the product going back. We were in the warehouse every day as well. So we basically created packaging now that means that it can be drop tested to 60 centimeters. Our mirrors are drop tested to a meter.
Okay.
And we saw that as a huge drain on finances in the business.
Yeah.
And because we were putting all the pieces together, both with the customer service and doing work in the warehouse as well, and also talking to the suppliers, we were able to create really strong packaging for our products.
I'm with you. And so you've got your first products. You've been on Alibaba. What's the next step from there then?
So initially, we were selling on eBay. eBay was the first platform. I've been trading for quite a long time on eBay, and then Dan came on and started setting up Amazon.
Yeah, so we very, very quickly figured out that channels was the way we were going to go. We didn't have the money to say, right, let's go and spend £50,000 on a website, brands making a new website, and let's go and pay for a lot of ads to the website. We just didn't have that capital. Because we had the eBay profile, we could sell things on eBay quite easily because we had lots of reviews and ratings, so customers could come to the site and we were ranking quite well. We then looked at other channels we could go onto. So Amazon was the next one we went onto. And so we started on Amazon, and that started going really well. Then at about the age of, I think it was about 20, so about 2 and a bit years after we'd started, Tesco Direct contacted us because they'd seen the reviews we were getting and the products we were selling and said, we want you as a seller on our platform. And I'll never forget the day they came to visit us, because it was just myself and Monty at this point. I think they assumed that we were maybe a bigger team.
Yeah.
We worked out of an old chimney factory. That's where the warehouse was, and our office was this tiny little space at the back of a sort of an artist studio. So what we asked the artist to do, funny enough, she actually works for us now because we've stayed very good friends. But what we asked her to do is if we could borrow the gallery. So we cleared out the gallery floor, put this big table in, so made it look as though we had this meeting room.
Yeah. Okay.
And then
you played the game.
Managed to convince someone from Tesco Direct that 2 20-year-old guys could facilitate growth on their platform, and it was a fantastic leap for us, and certainly a big one because they didn't have many suppliers on there. And so as soon as we went on to there, we saw really good sales, and that drove our growth. And from there, we then went on to Wayfair, and a lot of other channels since. So that was always a way we decided we were going to grow, because your margins are fixed. You know what you're getting. You put a product onto Amazon and you might be charged 15%, for example. You can build that into your costing. Whereas if you build a website and you put a product on your website and nobody visits your website without paid ads, you don't know what your margin is, and it's a lot more difficult.
Yeah, definitely. And were you doing any social media marketing at this point, or was it all just word of mouth and through channels?
Yeah, it was all through channels. We became incredibly good at learning how the channel worked.
Yeah.
So picking apart the algorithm, working out what pricing strategy we should put forward in terms of penetration. So this is a big one that we use in terms of penetration the platform with lower margin, and then building a bit of traction with the product, and then bringing the price to the actual price that it should be. Gaining reviews as well. We made sure that we were incredibly on it with customer service, and if there was a problem, we would sort it out, because we knew the value that reviews had on a product, especially when you're just launching one. We needed to make sure that we had strong reviews, and we were getting the product in front of people through different tactics on these sites.
I think that was the key. We did everything. So we unloaded the containers. We used to have a phone by the container that if someone called for customer service, one of us would hop off the container, answer the call, solve the query, and then jump back in. So because of that, we realised the importance across the board. We would work all throughout the night in the evenings, and you get customers saying, "Why on earth are you replying to my email at 9:30 at night?" But it's that extra level you go to. You call that person the next morning.
You notice that as a customer. You do notice it. It always baffles me when companies don't do that side of the business correctly. I'm like, it's so easy to just be nice and to be accommodating, and you'll get a good review out of it, and that does pile up. And I think businesses underestimate that.
Yeah, and I think lots of companies think that their job's done once they've sold the product.
Yeah.
But a lot of the repeat business and the word of mouth and the reviews, which then feed back into the sales funnel, actually come from afterwards. So we put a lot of focus, even still, on our customer service, making sure that if there is a problem, someone can pick up the phone and talk to one of our team, who has the agency to also sort it out as well, and isn't going to just give a robotic response.
I think one thing that holds a lot of people back when it comes to starting a business is the idea that, especially if it's a really saturated sector like furniture, it's not like it's a sort of new tech space where it's barely discovered and you sort of, you get first movers advantage. But I think sort of fear of competitors sets a lot of people back. What was it for you guys that made you think, we can go in the space and compete with these big guys? Did you have an edge, or did you just think we can just do it and eventually an edge will make itself apparent? How did that kind of affect you?
I think our edge it was twofold. I'd say, first of all, our work ethic. So we said, we are going to make this work. We're going to work just flat out hours, 13, 14, 15-hour days every single day, 365 days of the year if we need to. We are going to make this a success. The second point is looking at your competitors. So initially the competitors on the platform and saying, we will be better than them in every way. So looking at maybe their feedback scores and saying, okay, they've only got 90% out of 100, we're going to have 95 or 99. Second of all, their products. So saying, okay, what are they selling on the platform? What's popular? How can we make that better? Let's make these improvements. And so for us, it was always looking at how we could be better than our competitors and offer a better service as well, because things will go wrong with every single company, every single product. There will be times where something goes wrong, but it's making those things right that make a massive difference. And I think a lot of companies disregard that, but word of mouth is so important. We see it all the time in our reviews where customers have bought something, say, wow, I had such an amazing experience, I recommended it to my family or my friends, and they've then gone and bought something. And it's that service level that really drove us forward, I think.
No, definitely. I think even now, when you've got social media marketing, which is just so saturated, that word of mouth marketing is definitely more powerful.
Absolutely.
I think just to add to that as well, I think we've always been incredibly confident in our abilities and our ability to sort problems out. We never look at a challenge as something that's not something that could be overcome. So Dan and I, we used to drive into work together. We lived together. We still live together as well, and we'd constantly be talking to each other and solving these problems. So we just built that confidence in terms of, we will do this, we are going to do this, and if any problem comes along the way, we will sort it out one way or another. So yeah, that's the general mentality that we've had.
Big moment, the first sale. Tell me about that. How did that come about? Who was the customer? How did you acquire them? How did it feel? Take me through that experience. Look at the smiles already on your faces. Look how happy. It still hits you.
I know. I honestly can't remember. The smiles because I can't remember. I think on that though, I think we get those moments all the time when we bring out a new product, and that's still the buzz. Doing a lot of research with the product, doing all of the merchandising, getting all of the pricing right, getting onto the platforms, and then for a customer to go and click on that and say, yes, I want to buy that product, and then obviously getting the sale, that's still a huge buzz. So we just brought out a new lighting range, and it's been a long process, probably about a year, getting all the compliance sorted. With that, it's been a bit of a nightmare, but we've got the product to market, and we had our first sales last week, and that's been absolutely fantastic. I can't remember a moment when we had our first furniture sale, because it was so long ago, and because I was doing a lot of other selling as well, it sort of merged into one.
It's like being a kid at Christmas. Anytime you bring out a new range, we are literally waiting there for the first sale, and where it's come from and who's bought it. So that's the exciting stuff now. It's going forward, and it might be a new geography. So we've just launched in the US, and the first sale there, we were absolutely buzzing about, and telling everyone at work, and it's those exciting moments. Because you have such a build up. It might be 6 months of hard work for that point, but then you know that you've got it right, and the customers are happy with it.
So. It must be a really nice feeling. Well, so what work goes into launching a new line then?
So it used to be Dan and I just picking products because we'd done a bit of research online and thought that we had a good price point, and it was going to be a good seller. It had like a nice appeal. Now we've got a whole team, so we've got someone who will look at trends, look at ideas, bring in her own ideas as well. And then we will send it through a whole process, which will go through things like compliance, all of the technical documentation, lots of sampling that we have. We'll make sure that all the products are FSC and like UKFR certified. So there's lots of different processes, and then it gets passed on to our listings team, who then pick it up, and then we'll format all of the data in the correct way to feed through to all of the different channels. Dan and I literally used to do this the whole time. So we used to build the most incredibly complex spreadsheets that would basically take all of the data and feed the data out into the format that was needed for all of the different channels. So that was just for an efficiency saving. But now we've got a great team.
How big is your team now?
It's just over 50.
Your first hire, who was that, and why was that the first role that you hired? And how far along the journey were you when you made that choice?
So our first hire was a woman called Trudy, and it actually wasn't us going out to put a job out. It was someone coming to us asking if we needed help. Us sitting back saying, well, we just unloaded 2 or 3 containers today. We've done all of the customer service. Actually, we could do with a helping hand. But she was in customer service. And that was about 3 years into Furniturebox.
So the first 3 years, it's just the two of you.
Yeah.
Amazing.
But I think it's so valuable, those 3 years, that set us up for the rest of our time.
Yeah.
And initially with that first hire, it was all based on sort of the front end. So we realized that we were growing at quite a substantial rate and we couldn't keep doing everything. So we said, right, okay, first hire is going to be customer service. So that takes a little bit away so we can focus on the other side of things.
Yeah.
Then it was the warehouse. So we built up sort of the front end first before, as the years went on, building up a marketing team, for example. So it was very much just geared on, we're selling a lot of products, but we need people to help us get those out the door. But we were still heavily involved up until probably about a year or so ago.
And you can imagine it's just been Dan and I for 3 years, knowing absolutely everything about the business, and then just bringing someone else in and sort of expecting them to pick up as well and be like, oh, we know everything. But we learned the hard way in terms of having to really teach people and train people in the right way, and impart knowledge rather than just relying on car journeys.
Fair enough.
I think what was difficult as well is that we were only 19 or 20 at this point. And when you're bringing someone in that's more than double your age and telling them what to do, it sort of feels a bit weird.
I bet.
And we'd never had experience of managing people. In terms of leadership, we've captained sports teams and that sort of thing. But this was our first experience of managing someone. And so that was difficult initially. And I think over the first year or two, we got some things a bit wrong because we were essentially best friends with our staff, which is a fantastic way to be. Then that made it difficult if something didn't quite go according to plan, or if you needed to be honest and truthful about something, because you don't want to hurt that person's feelings.
Age-old issues.
Of course. So how have you gone about making sure you hire the right people then, since Trudy? Including Trudy.
So for the first about 10 hires, it was pretty much just word of mouth, just people in the village that we'd heard of. We didn't really go out to seek any particular expertise. And even for the next year and a half, it was all geared towards the front end of the business. So in the warehouse, in the customer service team, a bit of HR, a bit of accounting. And then Dan and I realized that to really drive the business on, we need to stop doing a lot of the back end things that are actually going to be pushing the business on. So that's all of the tech side of things, all of the marketing, all of the listings that I was talking about. So we basically built a team that was based in Bristol to do all of that. And we probably should have done that a lot sooner in hindsight. But we didn't want to give it up. We quite enjoyed a lot of that.
I've heard a few people say that, to be honest. It's just really hard to actually start delegating. And it's hard to know when to start delegating and actually letting go of some responsibilities.
I think the key as well is culture.
Yeah.
That's a huge thing for us. So we are like a family-run company. I'll sit down and talk to anyone and everyone. We know every single person's name in the company. It's all about the culture of the company. And if you might be the best person for the job, but if you're not going to fit the culture, if you've got an ego or you think you're better than someone else, or you're just not going to fit in with the team and be a team player, then you're not right for us. And so that has really helped push us forward because our staff retention rates are fantastic. When someone joins Furniturebox, they don't tend to leave. And so that has enabled us to grow much further because up until about 2 or 3 years ago, we only had about 20 staff, 15 staff. And if those staff had left, if those staff weren't enjoying their jobs, we wouldn't be where we are today. So it's so important to make sure that people are happy at work. And so that's always been a big thing for us.
I wanted to touch on the fact that you guys are best friends, because I think that's a really important point for a lot of people, because obviously there's the age-old thing of, don't mix business and friends and don't work with friends. I've always found it to be a great thing. I find it to be really conducive. I spoke to an entrepreneur the other day who said, I believe in starting things with friends and working with friends, but I don't believe in hiring friends, because then there's a power dynamic there that I'm not really comfortable with. But then I've met people who have done the opposite. So talk me through that. What was it like? Did you guys think about that ahead of time, about what it was going to be like? Did you have to sit down and say, look, who's doing what, who's this, who's that? I think that's quite an uncomfortable thing for a lot of people.
I think we've always had a very, very clear understanding of where we want to go, and we realize that working together is going to mean that we're going to get there. So I think we've been clear about that from the start. At the beginning, I think it did help that I'd started the business and I was able to impart the knowledge. So I was in a way to begin with senior, but then very quickly I saw Dan was fully invested in it and wanted to share it with him. So I think that really aided things, and we now have regular conversations in terms of our approach to it, and where we want to get to, and how we're feeling about things. So we're very open in that regard, and yeah, we've got the same friendship group, we live together, so yeah, it hasn't been a negative at all, and it helps knowing someone really, really well, I think.
Yeah, no, it's that level of trust. It's where you know someone so well, you know every single thing about them, you know what they're good at, what they're not so good at. And for us, it's worked incredibly well, because we knew going in, and this is sort of bringing it back to what I said initially, we were going to make it work. And I knew how hard Monty worked through school, and I knew how hard we needed to work together to make it work. And a lot of the time, if you go in with a friend, sometimes that friend doesn't work as hard, or there's one person who's not doing or pulling their weight. That never happened with us, and so we always pulled our weight. We always went into things together, and I think it's a bit of a weird situation to be living with and with someone. But for us, it really worked, because the only time we had to ourselves where we could say, right, let's work on the business rather than in the business, was on car journeys. And so it was on the commute, and we used to drive. It was about an hour and 15 from Bristol into our warehouse in Myr, and they were some of the most productive hours. And so we literally lived, breathe, slept, eat, work. And so it's just worked incredibly well. I think we complement each other well in terms of what we're good at, and what we're not so good at.
Yeah.
And I think you have to get lucky with that, because I do know people that
you do. Yeah, you do. You need to know the other person very well, right? I think me and Ollie starting this podcast, it's a good match of skills, and you need to know that before you start, to be honest with you.
Yeah, I'd like to know, what is it that's, in terms of the division sort of between the two of you, what are your strengths and what are your weaknesses, and vice versa? Like, where do you complement each other? Because I always find that interesting.
So I think I look at things from a more financial perspective. It's purely based on how I've been thinking from a very young age, because I always wanted to make sure we were making the most with our money, and we were reinvesting it in the right way. So yeah, on the financial side and the product marketing side, I do a little bit more, and people.
Yeah, so I think this is where it complements quite well. We do a lot of the same things on different channels. So for example, I might manage Amazon, while Monty might manage Wayfair, but there are separate things that we do outside of that. So obviously with the people side, I'm probably stronger in terms of like teams and people and pulling people together, making sure people are on task, that sort of thing. But in terms of the division of work, we do a lot of things, and I think it really helped in the early stages, because we could do everything. We weren't relying on one another to say, oh, I can't do this, can you do that? Or I can't. Yeah. It's an interesting one, because people always ask that, but we don't, like a lot of founders, we don't have separate roles where I'm only responsible for product, for example, and Monty's only responsible for financials. We do a lot of the same things.
I think we have stronger areas, and Dan deals with certain areas like all the legal things, looking through legal documentation and that sort of thing. But as Dan said, we do have a lot of skills that we are both very good at, because we essentially grew up together in business, so we both know the same things, or many of the same things, and I think where the division lies is where we prefer and where we enjoy, and where we maybe worked a little bit harder over the years.
Yeah.
In terms of scaling, so you're starting to get some sales in. There's a bit more sort of consistency in terms of like, okay, this could actually start to be something. How long do you wait until you pay yourself? And then when it gets to the point where you are paying yourselves, how do you determine what percentage of the money coming in is what you spend on each other? How do you divide that? Can you sort of touch on that a little bit?
So initially we didn't pay ourselves a huge amount. So nominal salaries were about £25,000, and that was for the first year or two. I always had the philosophy that if the money's in the business, then it's our money anyway.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
It doesn't necessarily matter, and the money can be spent better, especially in those early stages, in the business rather than outside of it. And we continued on that trajectory, slowly upping our salary for the first 3 years. So probably about £10,000 a year we'd upped it. And then at the point we had a really, really good year and a half during COVID, and we said, right, okay, this is the time to take a bit of money off the table. So we paid ourselves larger dividends than we would have normally, and both invested in houses.
Okay.
Just to say, okay, we fully believe in this, but we've got the cash reserves within the business to take a bit of money off the table. And if something drastic happens for whatever reason, we've both
at least you've got that.
Yeah, we've got our houses. So yeah.
Vanity was never that important to us, and having a flashy car or having designer clothes wasn't anything we cared about. We cared about driving the business forward. And so, as Monty said, anything we could put back in, we knew if we put £20,000 back into the business, that £20,000 might turn into £100,000 in a year's time. And so we were always focused on that. So I think it's really important for people starting out not to instantly see what they're making, think, fantastic, I can spend that. It's thinking ahead to say, right, what can I do with that money that's going to put me in a better position in the years to come? Yeah.
And just on that note then, what is it that's driving you forwards now?
I think it's the aim of being the largest furniture company in the world. Okay. Well, it is, and we've done very well for ourselves. We're 25 years old. We always get asked, "What's your end game? Like, you can just sell this. You wouldn't have to work." But for us, it's empowering our employees. It's building the company. It's the excitement, as we were saying earlier, of selling the product. It's building fantastic products. It's seeing new opportunities every single day that excite you, that get you out of bed. So all of these different things that are driving us on, and it's you do need good financials to be able to back that all up and to be able to do all of those things. But it's not the financials that are personally driving us, because we've got everything that we need. Sure. And a bit more cash in the bank personally isn't going to make us any happier.
I think it's about being the best that you could possibly be in your field. And when we were younger, sort of taking this right back, we played professional football for youth teams. So I was at Bristol Rovers and Monty was at Yeovil, then Bournemouth. We were always striving to be the best, whether that was we were super competitive, whether it was in school football teams, whether it was anything, wanted to be the best. And so it's that same drive now that we want to be the best furniture company in the world, the biggest furniture company in the world. We want to give the best experience. We want to give the best products, and that's sort of what gets us up every day, and that's what pushes us forward, because if we can do things better than everyone else and we can do that while growing, we can bring a whole raft of products to customers around the world and know that people are going to be happy with that and have a better experience than they can have anywhere else.
One thing, go on.
No, go on.
I was just going to say, one thing I actually wanted to ask you, Dan, was what gave you the confidence to join Monty right at the start? Because I know we were talking before the podcast and you were saying you had a place lined up at university and you were going to go down the more sort of traditional route, should we say. What gave you, when Monty came to you, the confidence to think, right, I'm going to put that on hold, maybe even say no to it completely and focus on the business because I believe in it?
Yeah, so I think one of the big things is, having known Monty since at the age of about 10, I knew how hard he worked. And so whilst we were all still at school and he was selling various bits and bobs, we could see how hard Monty worked and how driven he was. So having grown up all throughout school with him and building a very, very good friendship, I knew that if I was to go into business with someone, he was the sort of person I would want to go into business with. And I know that we would make it a success together. Also with university, I had a place there, but I deferred it. So I said, right, if the worst comes to the worst and it goes horribly wrong and it doesn't work or we don't work together, I can just go to uni next year. And so I think a really important thing is when you're younger, your overheads and your responsibilities are much lower. If I was 25 or 26 and maybe I was coming out of a job and there was no guarantee on anything, it might have been a slightly more difficult decision. But for me, it was pretty instant. I remember Monty asked me, I'd said yes there and then. It wasn't
Yeah.
a considered thing. So I think making that decision when you're younger makes things a hell of a lot
It
easier.
does. Yeah.
What were you going to study?
Economics
Right. Okay.
at Loughborough. Yeah.
Right.
I love sports, so I thought I'd try and this is the whole thing with uni. I love sports, so I was like, I'm going to tie it in with going to a sporty uni and doing something to do with business, because I always wanted to run my own business, just didn't know what it would be in.
Yeah.
But glad I didn't go now.
In the early stages, because we had Charlie Mullins on from Pimlico Plumbers the other day, and he was making a really big point about, from the very beginning, he made a really big point about branding and about sort of differentiating himself as being very different to what was out there, whether it was in uniforms or the approach to the business. In terms of like the name and the branding and everything else, how much thought did you guys give to that early doors? Because some people say, look, I know I've done this where, you procrastinate for weeks on end being like, well, I need the name and I can't do anything else without the name. And I think a lot of people go through that. Was it a case where you spent a while sort of really cracking down before you launched, or was it sort of a move fast and break things kind of situation?
Definitely the latter, move fast and break things. Yeah, we made every mistake under the sun to begin with. We wanted to get products out. We wanted to sell the product. Brand has been a huge afterthought, to be perfectly honest, and it's an area that we have so much runway with, because fundamentally there's so many good things about our business, but we don't articulate that to our customers through the website. And I think there's going to be a lot that we're going to do with that in the coming years. But yeah, initially for us, it was about product and channels. And on the channels we sold on, we didn't necessarily need a brand to do that. But in hindsight, if we'd branded things a lot better, we would have been far further forward. And that brand equity that we would have gained over the years would be pretty immense. Having said that, we were making lots of mistakes at the same time. So maybe not having the brand for the first 3 years is probably a good thing, because we're in a better place now. So so the service is better. But yeah, that's the way we went about it.
I think the important thing Monty said there as well is because of the channels. So because of the channels, they were our brand. If you go and buy something from Amazon, you say, oh, I bought this from Amazon. You don't say, oh, I bought this from Furniturebox. So for us, we didn't give it as much consideration as perhaps if we were launching a website. And yeah, as Monty said, it was a bit of an afterthought. But looking back now, it's a mistake we've learned from and we're rectifying. So
I mean, I guess and I was just to sort of fly away point, I guess at the end of everything, it's better to have a great product and then you can figure out branding than to have the most sparkly branding with no substance behind it. So
exactly,
it's worse mistakes to make.
And better than that is you need to be in the game. You need to be making money to be able to reinvest. And we didn't want to fall short. So our priority was always to make sure that the business was generating revenue and thinking about how we could do that, just so that we could get past those first few years. And now we're getting to a really exciting point where we've done that grind. We've got the business into a position where we can start developing these things from a position of strength. So,
and when was the sort of pivot, I suppose, to your own website versus channels?
So it was once we generated enough revenue.
Yeah.
And this is where putting money back into the business was so key, because we had some revenue. We said, right, what should we do with this? And we said, let's build a website, because with a website, we manage our own costs. With Amazon and eBay, we have a 10% and a 15%, for example, that we have to pay. So we said, ultimately, if we can drive more revenue to our website, that means we're not having to pay all of these fees. Granted, you might need to advertise, you might need to spend on SEO and PPC to get people to that site. But organically over time, if you can drive that, it's essentially free revenue. So we started out on a bit of a brand mission to say, let's create this website. Remember, the first website we created was rubbish. Looking back now, it worked, but it wasn't great, and we didn't put a huge amount of time into it. I was doing most of the we did have a development agency, but because they were quite expensive, I was doing a lot of the dev work and the back end work of the website and changing lots of things, sort of just Googling how to do things and getting on with it on a Magento site. But it was really sort of at that point where we said, what can we do with this money? Where would be best invested? We could place more money in stock, but actually stock's turning around relatively quickly. Let's build the website at the right time.
And what's your split now then between sales on your website versus channels?
Our website's at about 40%.
Okay.
So it's the front runner.
Yeah.
Oh, and then the other channels split out. Varying. So we've got channels like Wayfair and Amazon who are sort of 20, and got the smaller ones like the range in B&Q and Robert Dars.
Was there anything that you thought, sort of, I know we mentioned it briefly earlier, but when you were looking at your competitors early on, was there anything that you thought or that you do now that you think you do differently to them? Or was it a case of just, we're going to do exactly what they do, we're just going to do it better? Or sort of a hybrid of the two?
I think we do quite a few things differently to them. We are massively catered around the customer and that customer experience, to the point where with our instructions, for example, they're video instructions. So you get a QR code on the instructions, you scan the QR code and it will take you to a YouTube video where you've got live models putting together the tables. That's come from the fact that over the last 7 years, 6-7 years, myself and Monty have been on the end of those phone calls when customers, they used to call up and say, I can't assemble this. And I'd run out to the warehouse, get one, takes a picture of the warehouse and send it to them. And so we were like, right, how can we make this easier? Because one of the biggest gripe points, I think, for all people when buying furniture is, it's
putting it together. That's such a really interesting point, because I have never, ever, all the furniture I've bought, never had that come up in any of the furniture I've bought. So that's interesting that you put the QR code with a video on it. I mean, that's a really good, really good point.
Everything. I mean, any time where you used to Google something to learn it, it's just YouTube now. YouTube is the new Google.
It is.
If I want to learn anything, I want to watch someone physically, because I'm an idiot, and so I don't want to. If I read it, I might make a mistake. But if I see someone go, the screw goes in this thing, I go, right, I've got a screw and I've got this thing. So that's a genius idea.
The thing is that's all born on making the customer experience better. Our customer service team are personable. So you'll call up someone in our customer service team, there's an issue, and there's not a set response of this is what we can do. It's actually, how can we help you? Whether that's putting something on a special AM delivery for you, whether that's sending something on a truck, a dedicated truck because you need it that day. They're there to support you, and you're speaking to a person. You're not just speaking to a wall that's been given a script saying, this is what we can do. Sorry, we can't go above and beyond that. And even now, myself and Monty, if we need to and when we need to, we pick up a phone and call a customer. If they've had a really terrible time, and I'll call up and say, and likewise with Monty, we'll call up and say, look, we're really sorry, this is what we can do for you, and try and resolve it. Because for us, it's all about that customer experience. Product-wise, also that's where I think we're a little bit different to competitors. We are very competitively priced, and that's because we're a very lean company. So we don't have huge overheads still, and it means that we can beat a lot of our competitors on price. And one thing that we use is we are essentially champagne taste for beer money.
So I like that.
People that want,
I'm stealing that. That's good.
People that want their house to look great and get great quality furniture, don't want to pay really high prices. We are the gap in the market there for them, and there's not many companies in the furniture industry that are doing that.
And just to add to that on the customer piece, we're looking to push our cut-off time back to 8 o'clock in the evening, which will be industry leading for furniture. So we'll be able to send a dining set out, a sofa out, if someone orders it before 8 o'clock, and they'll receive it next day. Currently it's 1 o'clock, but with our new warehouse in the new year, that's what we'll be achieving.
Wow.
So it's all very much customer focused in terms of how can we make the customer experience better. And as Dan pointed out, through a lot of our experiences that we've had, we know exactly what the customer's thinking and what the customer's wanting, because we've been on the front line, and we've been able to join up all the dots as well with the warehouse, spending years in the warehouse, spending years on the phone to customers, spending years developing products, where then able to try and tailor the whole operation to serving the customer. So yeah, I think that's one area that we're starting to, what we have been a lot better in, is starting to make inroads on our competitors, and also our agility as well, to move quickly, to be able to seize different opportunities, to latch onto new trends, that sort of thing.
Did you ever do any recon, like buy a competitor's product and maybe call their customer service and all that kind of stuff and make them, it's like, they didn't do that. We could start doing that on ours.
Yeah, funnily enough, we do on occasions.
Yeah.
Not that often, but the last time I did it was because I wanted to see their version of a similar product. It was a solid wood item, and I wanted to see what it was like. I actually ended up calling them up and giving them some help and feedback. Right, you need to focus your legs in.
Yeah.
They weren't a big competitor; they were just a local company. But I said, "You're going to have problems with this," and sort of help them out in that sense.
Wow.
Because we have done it on occasion, but we've always been focused on driving forward and making our product better. So sometimes we do it to compare and see what our product's like against theirs, and you can take a lot of things from people's websites as well. So, and we'll always scan our competitors' websites, see what they're doing. They might have an idea, and we might say, that's a really good idea, but we can do it better. Or we will add this on because we know that has more value. So I think it's important to
And
understand
I think that's a really good point about you don't necessarily need to have the idea, you just need to be able to do it the best. And that's always been our philosophy. We come up with lots of ideas the whole time, but some of the best ideas out there are ideas that other people have thought of, and it's important to then not necessarily replicate them exactly, but think about how you can maybe add to them and improve them and come in from a different angle. So yeah, that's one thing that we've always done.
I wanted to just go back to that thing you said about the small company that you actually called them up and gave them some feedback and some advice. I think that's really interesting, and I want to ask you why you did that, because I think, like, you know, there's that famous Tupac interview when he was talking about the state of the world, and he was like, it's a lot of gimme, 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 push, push, push. And I think a lot of business people would think, even if they're not a direct competitor, I don't want to give them any chance if they could overtake us. Why did you do that?
So for me, I love helping people, and this is, in a business sense, I love it. So I've got friends and family that have started up businesses that I've spent a lot of time helping them in their business, because if I can impart some of my knowledge and save them the stresses and issues we went through, then I will. With that particular company, they were quite a small local company, and for them, they probably don't take into consideration a lot of these things, because we learnt the hard way, having been on the end of the phone. But if you're not learning the hard way and you're just selling these products and you're saying, oh, okay, we've got a damage rate of 50%, we're just factoring it into our margin, you're not working on anything. So I thought, actually, if I impart that knowledge onto them, they are going to have a better business, a better product, and that might save them a few £1,000s, particularly in this climate. Companies are struggling. And so anything that can be done to help a company, give advice, I'm more than happy to do it. If it was a main competitor, probably wouldn't do the same thing. But I think it's really important, and it's a good thing to do, because people have given us advice in the past, and that has made a huge difference. There's some bits of advice that people have given us that they might have thought was absolutely minute, but that's actually led to game-changing things for us. So anything we can do to support or help anyone else or give advice on, I'm always all that.
Do you see that as a level of success or a sign of success?
It's an interesting question. I think so, in a way that if people are asking you for that help, that does make you feel good, because you're like, oh, somebody's wanting to do what we're doing.
Valuing your opinion.
Yeah, I must be doing something right. Yeah.
So I guess so. Yeah, but it's something I love doing. Likewise, Monty.
Yeah, and I think especially when we started out at a young age, people were so free with advice, and they felt as though they needed to look after us and help us and guide us, because they saw two vulnerable 18-year-olds making their way in business and thought, I would probably need to give them a bit of a hand here. So yeah, and likewise, Dan and I would always help people. We've helped our friends with lots of different things, if anyone asks us, we always would give advice.
So on that, I'm going to have to ask then, what's some of the best advice that you guys have been given, and by who, if there's anyone sort of noteworthy or anything, but sort of what's some of the practical advice that people gave you that's sort of been the most impactful?
So probably one of the biggest things for us, and this is quite specific to our industry and what we do, but it was the idea of rolling deposits. So what we used to do with our suppliers was we pay a 30% deposit and then 70% when the items were being shipped. That meant that we had all that cash strapped and tied up with our suppliers. And as we were growing, it was becoming a massive bane, because we were like, this is really frustrating. We want to grow quicker. We want to be able to buy more stock, because we're selling out, but then we can't get the stock in time. And it was literally just over a dinner with somebody in a similar industry said, oh, why haven't you thought about rolling deposits? And we said, well, what's that?
Yeah.
And so what the idea of a rolling deposit is, you pay your supplier a nominal amount. So it might be £10,000, for example. And that means that you never need to pay a deposit. So that means that you can then order, let's say, £1 million worth of stock, and you don't pay a deposit. So for us, that meant that we had all of this cash liquidated that we could then reinvest in the business. We could get all of this stock in, and we can sell it without having to pay that 30%. And that transformed our business.
I think there's a wider point there on just cash flow strategy and how you're planning to work with your suppliers, and if you don't ask, you don't get. And quite often, if you think of some different areas, you're able to maybe stretch a few suppliers or ask for certain terms. You'll probably get it because there is goodwill with many people.
You hear a lot about like nightmare suppliers and, you know, all sorts of things going wrong and people getting ripped off. How did you find the suppliers that you had when you started? And what sort of things would you recommend if people are going into a sort of B2C product-based business? What sort of advice would you give to people who are going to need to vet suppliers themselves?
Firstly, I'd say make sure you read the contracts fully, know exactly what they mean, understand all the terminology, edit them as well. Quite often people think that just because someone sent you a contract that you can't add bits in, but make it tailored to something that's going to suit you. Because if you've got that, especially if it's overseas and it's a little bit harder to actually act on some of these things, but if you've got that, especially in the UK, then that is the gospel that everything will go back to when it goes wrong. So make sure you fully understand that.
That's a really big point.
I think as well with suppliers, build those relationships. So go and see your suppliers, spend time with them. And with a lot of our suppliers, they saw us as these young 17, 18-year-old kids and said, right, we need to take you a little bit under our wings. We need to support you. And we built these incredible relationships to the point now where we're still in very, like we have calls with them every single week. And we have such good relationships. We know all of their families. You know, you ask them how they're doing, you catch up with them, and you built that relationship. So when something goes wrong, or you need to lean on them, or they need to lean on you, you're there to support each other. And a great example was during COVID. There was a huge issue with stock because there was massive demand, and so suppliers had to cut out some of the companies they're working with and prioritize. And we made sure that we had the priority stock. So there were probably companies out there, furniture companies all over the world, that didn't get their stock, but we did, and it's because of those relationships. So it's so important to make the effort, go and see people and build those relationships.
Yeah, definitely. I think people really underestimate that. It's very transactional, I think, for a lot of businesses. If you can build it on a more personal level, it definitely pays dividends further down the line.
It might sound quite counterintuitive to be making sure you've got a really watertight contract and then trying to build a relationship. I suppose it's the whole point of expecting the worst but hoping for the best. So once you've got that contract, you understand where the line is, and then you build on that relationship, and hopefully you'll never ever need to use that, and the relationship will be stronger than that contract.
Yeah, sure. And so what have been some of the hardest points of the business today?
The hardest points, I think COVID was an incredibly tough time because our sales literally doubled.
Sounds awful.
It sounds really tough. I don't know. Yeah, you managed to do it.
So
I'm really sorry, man.
Thank you. That means a lot.
Yeah, it was terrible.
That's amazing. That's a clip in itself. It was really hard for us. We doubled our revenue. It was
an absolute nightmare.
So I think we always knew that it was all good, but it was just the physical and mental tiredness of actually fulfilling that doubling of orders and then bringing the business up to speed to cope for that amount of orders. So that means double the amount of calls, double the amount of messages, double the amount of products. You're then trying to think, okay, we really need to take advantage of this opportunity. We need to make sure our forecasting is absolutely bang on. Is our pricing completely right? Are we going to run out of stock? So all of these effects happened when COVID happened. So I personally was getting up at 4 every morning. I was going into the warehouse because I was doing a stint when other people weren't in the warehouse because no one really knew exactly what it was. So everyone was social distancing, being away. I was doing a stint in the warehouse to get product out. I then come home at about 12 midday and then literally sit in my bed and answer emails and do work for the next 6-7 hours and then go to bed at about 8:30 and then do the same again for about 3 months. And that was just really, really tough. And I always, and Dan was the same, we were always sort of guided by knowing, or we always had in the back of my mind that when we come out of this, we are going to be in a fantastic position.
Yeah.
And it was never really a chore, but there were some moments that were incredibly draining.
You mentioned forecasting in that. I think that brings to light another thing that a lot of people wonder, which is that in the beginning, you're buying the furniture. How do you know how much to buy? How do you know that, you don't want to have too much lying around that, you don't know what you're going to sell at the beginning? How did you sort of manage that? Not buying too much, too little?
Some of it was gut instinct. So you would look at who else was selling similar products on the market. With platforms like eBay, very luckily you can actually see how many they'd sold. So you could go onto an eBay listing and see how many sales they've had in the last day.
Yeah, you filtered by completed and sold items. Yeah.
And so that was incredibly useful information, because we said, right, if we can get a similar product and it's going to be 20% cheaper than this, we can predict roughly how many we're going to sell. Other products, it's got instinct, and it's still today, it's very difficult to predict, because you can do all of the research, all of the data, but it really depends on your merchandising. So if you get the images wrong, if you get the price wrong, if the assembly is really difficult, all of these things can have an impact on how much you sell and what you sell. Because if you get one bad review, no one's going to buy anything. And so it's really difficult to properly forecast, but you can make best sort of estimates, I think. And with a lot of our products now, where we have access to 10 different platforms and access to the German and US market, it makes it a little bit easier, because you might find that the product sells incredibly well on 3 platforms, but not on the remaining 6. So it's quite tough. We do have a forecaster in our team, and poor guy, it's been pretty awful 2 years.
Stressful job,
all sorts, trying to forecast everything. But
and I think we've always taken the approach of trying to get a minimum viable product to market as quickly as possible, to work out and see the sales and see if it's going to work. And I think quite often lots of companies might spend way too long on something and they miss the boat. So we're always trying to work out how we can do things quickly, how we can fast track something, just to see if it works. And then if it doesn't, then we just move on.
Right.
That was going to be one of my questions, actually, is how do you decide what products you're launching and decide the success of that product? But you've sort of just touched on it. It's building an MVP as quickly as possible and just testing it in the market, really.
I think having too much choice sometimes is actually a bad thing.
Yeah.
Because I know myself, I can be quite indecisive. And if I go and look at a sofa and it's in 30 colours, and there might be 6 different shades of blue, if there was only one shade of blue, I'd probably make the decision, so I'm going to get that.
Yeah.
But so for us, it is that minimal viable product, and making one fantastic product, or a selection of like a small selection of fantastic products that you can then build on. Because if you then know what sells, you can say, okay, we know that these ranges sold very well, let's make a new or similar design to that, but let's roll that out because we know that's successful.
Was there any thought behind, in the beginning, sort of how many lines, not in terms of lines, but in terms of, like, we're going to focus purely on couches at the beginning and then we'll expand to beds and whatever it might be? Or did you think we're going to start as a sort of suite? Was there any thought behind that?
So we predominantly, and still to the day, do dining sets. That's our main product. And partly the reason why we did that partly the reason why we still do that is because lots of people can't send dining sets through shipping, and it arrive at the customer undamaged. So that's where our packaging came in. But it was just circumstance that meant we started with dining furniture, although we did have a few other coffee tables and sofas, and that's just the thing that sold. So.
And did you have a business plan when you first started out of interest? Because I know that some people talk about, if before you start a business, you have to put a business plan together and have a very clear idea of where you want to go and where you want to get to. And then some people say it's all about making mistakes along the way and following your gut, etc. So where did you two fall in on those sort of?
Never had a business plan.
Okay.
This is I think the point, because a lot of it has been our gut, and now we do take more time doing it, sitting back and looking ahead rather than working sort of in the business, working on it and saying, right, what do we want to do next year? How are we going to get there? And that's so valuable. But back at the start, we didn't have a business plan. It was just, let's buy some furniture and sell it.
It sounds straightforward.
It's very much just go. Let's just do it. Let's just learn fast. Let's work all these things out. And as Dan said, we are now starting to be more considered and more targeted in our approach. And I think that is going to pay off. I think we're going to see that actually being more targeted, taking a step back, really focusing on what needs to be done to get to where we want to get to will pay off. But obviously, we've had a good 7 years, so maybe it's been a good thing.
I think what's really important on that front as well is to give your staff and your colleagues visibility on where we see the business going, because they're a huge part of that. We wouldn't be anywhere near where we are today without our staff. Our team are fantastic, like absolutely fantastic, every single one of them. And if they can get on board with that vision and they can see, okay, for 2023, this is where we want to drive Furniturebox, they can be invested in that and they can move that forward. And before, I think we get very excited about things. So it'd be like, right, by the way, guys, next 2 weeks we're going on to B&Q. Rather than the team knowing that's the vision.
Okay.
it was very ad hoc.
As we round off, this has been just such an amazing conversation. There's one question that we like to ask all of our guests, which is, if you could give one piece of practical advice to someone listening who wants to start a business, what would that be? And the reason I say practical is, obviously on a lot of podcasts and a lot of different mediums, we hear things like, work harder than the next guy, believe in yourself, never give up, all that kind of stuff. But we like to focus on actionable things that people can really take home and apply to a business that they might already have or they might be starting. So you can do one each, you can do one combined, whatever you like. But what's one piece of practical advice you could give?
I don't know whether this is classed as practical. So if I can do two, that'd be...
You can do as many as you want.
You could break the rule.
Yeah.
So, don't give us too much information.
Well, the first one would be to be very deliberate about your time and where you're spending it, and spend it on where the needle is going to be moved most, and do that thing first. Because I think all too often, and I know I did this, you end up getting to the end of the day and the thing that was actually the most important thing to do, you haven't done. And then that might roll into the next day. So be very deliberate about your time. And the next one, which is something everyone can do, is I'd recommend just sell something on eBay. Just get a product and just go and sell it. Just see what happens. You'll make some money out of it. You might learn something. You might talk to a customer. Just sell a product.
Monty's on commission with eBay.
I love that.
We'll put a link in bio, don't worry.
Yeah, exactly.
It's all right.
It's your Facebook Marketplace, whatever.
No, as someone who's done that, I can completely see the value in that. Monty? Not Monty, sorry, Dad. Do you want anything to add?
For me, one we mentioned already a little bit about working on your business rather than in it. It's so easy to get consumed in the business and not think about how you can take that step forward if you're incredibly busy and you're doing well. But take that step back, even if it's half a morning, just book it out and say, you know what, for all of this morning, I'm not going to care about anything else going on. I'm going to sit and go through where I want the business to be and how that's going to happen. So that's the first thing. On tradition with Furniturebox, I'll go for a second one as well.
Please do.
Is I think it's seizing opportunity. So any time something, it might be good or bad, happens, think, how's that going to impact me and how can I win from the situation? Because a lot of companies through COVID didn't go online very quickly and thought, oh, this is terrible, this is going to close down our stores. We thought the same thing. We were like, oh, this is awful. How are we going to work with this? But the first thing we said is, right, okay, what happens if this happens? How can we keep the business going forward? How can we capitalize on that? And so anything that goes wrong, look at it and say, how can we turn this into a positive? That's a really...
All for the price of one there.
I know that was really. I mean, there's not much I can say to that. Guys, this has been amazing. The floor is yours for anyone listening or watching at home. Where do you want to send people? This is your chance to plug. So anything Furniturebox, what do you want to say? Floor is yours.
I would just say watch this space. I think there's big things to come from Furniturebox. It's really exciting what we're doing with our products, and I think hopefully in a few years' time you'll be able to purchase one of them.
Well, I'd say actually before a few years' time, if anyone wants to purchase,
we're actually on sale now.
Yeah, exactly.
So, we do have a big sale on at the moment. But if you're in the market for any modern contemporary furniture, fantastic value with a fantastic service level, come and give us a look at Furniturebox.
Guys, thank you so much. What an amazing conversation. There you have it, guys. That was amazing. Thank you so much to Monty and Dan for being here. Go check out Furniturebox online. And for everyone watching at home, make sure you hit the subscribe button, hit that notification bell. If you're listening on Spotify, rate it 5 stars. And you can find us on social media at TGF Pod. And we will see you in the next episode. I've been Ollie Rayhart. He's been James Skeeth. And we've had Monty and Dan here from Furniturebox. Thanks for watching, guys.
Thanks,
Take care. Thanks for being here.